The first time Enzo Markley met the alien, it was over a can of expired chili. He didn't know it was watching from the far corner of the cargo bay, its translucent skin blending into the shadows, three eyes unblinking as it observed him crouched beside a crate marked non-essential human supplies. The crate was dusty, neglected. Enzo wiped the top with his sleeve and cracked it open. The can's label was faded, but it was unmistakably chili. Expired by 2 years, but the seal was intact. He gave it a shake, heard the slosh, and nodded approval. A few feet away, the alien watched in fascinated horror. Enzo pulled out his multi-tool, punctured the can, and sniffed it. "Still smells like chili," he said aloud, mostly to himself. "Could use some crackers?" He sat cross-legged on the metal floor and took his first bite. The chili was cold, metallic, and a little tangy, probably from the tomato paste breaking down, but it filled the void in his stomach. The alien stepped forward, revealing itself with a soft hiss of displaced air. Enzo glanced up mid-bite. "Whoa. Didn't see you there." It was tall and willowy, with a vaguely humanoid shape but no mouth that Enzo could see. Its limbs were longer than they should be, and it wore a harness that blinked with soft lights. "I am Yiln," it said, voice generated from a device strapped across its thorax. "You are consuming toxic matter." Enzo looked at his chili, then back at Yiln. "This?" he asked, pointing with his spoon. "Nah, it's just expired. 2 years. Maybe 3. I'll be fine. My stomach's tough." Yiln stood still for a moment, processing the statement. A small blinking light turned yellow on its voice box. "This is not rational behavior." Enzo gave a shrug. "Maybe not, but it's food. I've eaten worse." Yiln stared at him for a long moment and then, without another word, turned and walked away down the corridor. The chili was gone in 7 minutes. Enzo licked the spoon clean and tossed the can into the recycler. His stomach gurgled, but he ignored it. 3 hours later, he regretted everything. He was in his bunk, curled on his side, sweat beading on his forehead. The pain came in waves, sharp, deep cramps that made him groan. He pressed his hands against his stomach and tried to focus on breathing. Yiln reappeared at the doorway. "You are unwell." Enzo gritted his teeth. "Just food poisoning. Probably. I'll ride it out." "I informed the commander. You will be examined." "I don't need a wave of nausea cut him off." He bolted upright, barely making it to the waste unit before vomiting. When he looked up, Yiln was still there. "I told you. Toxic matter." Enzo wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Lesson learned. He spent the next 6 hours in the med bay, hooked up 2 and 4, under the careful eye of Dr. Velasquez, the only human medical officer on the ship. She was not impressed. "You're lucky," she said, scanning him. "No organ damage, but you've got a nasty case of bacterial gastroenteritis." "Great," Enzo muttered weakly. "So that's what that was. You need to stay hydrated, rest, and eat only what I authorize. No more scavenging off-world crates." "I wasn't scavenging," he protested. "I was. Improvising." She gave him a look that shut him up. Yiln stood just outside the glass wall of the med bay, observing without comment. Its large eyes blinked slowly, one at a time. Enzo stared back at it. "You know, I usually have pretty good instincts about food. You consumed matter that had been deemed unfit for your species." I know, Enzo sighed. "I'm not proud of it." Yiln tilted its head. "Is this a common trait among your kind?" "What, eating expired food?" "Yes." Enzo thought for a moment. "Not common, but not rare either. We do what we have to. Sometimes we risk it. Sometimes it's just habit." Yiln said nothing. The next day, Enzo was released from the med bay. He walked slowly, sore and dehydrated, but upright. Yiln followed him silently down the corridor. "So," Enzo said, trying for casual, "you guys don't have questionable food. Our nutritional systems are regulated. All sustenance is synthesized and sterile." "Sounds boring." "It is sufficient." They reached the communal deck, where other crew members, both human and alien, shared space during missions. Enzo collapsed onto one of the couches and leaned back. Yil stood beside him awkwardly. I have researched bacterial resilience, it said. Your gastrointestinal biology is chaotic. Thanks. It is. Impressive. But dangerous. Enzo chuckled, then winced as his stomach twinged. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that. You ingested a substance your own people marked as hazardous. Well, not hazardous. Just past its prime. Why? Enzo looked up at the ceiling, thinking. Because it was there. Because I was hungry. Because sometimes we take chances. It's kind of how we've always operated. You'll consider this. Your kind has survived much. Barely, Enzo said, smiling faintly. But yeah, we get by. That evening, the ship hit turbulence as it passed through a debris field. Enzo, still not fully recovered, was thrown from his bunk and landed hard on the floor. Pain shot up his arm. He groaned, clutching his wrist. Yil arrived moments later. You have sustained injury. No kidding. Dr. Velasquez confirmed a fractured radius after a quick scan. She immobilized it and prescribed a splint. You're not doing anything strenuous for the next 6 weeks, she said. Enzo nodded, biting back a grimace. As he returned to his quarters, Yil walked beside him. You consumed expired sustenance. Then you were injured during turbulence. Not my week, Enzo muttered. Your species continues to defy logical behavior. That's just Tuesday for us. Yil paused. Your physiology is fragile. Yet you persist. Enzo stopped walking and looked at the alien. Yeah, we do. We break bones, eat bad food, get sick, then keep going. It's not smart, but it's real. Yil said nothing, but for once, it didn't look entirely disapproving. 2 weeks later, Enzo returned to the cargo bay, this time with a proper inventory list and authorization. As he sorted through crates, he felt a familiar presence behind him. No, Yil, he said without turning. I'm not eating anything in here. There was a pause. Good. Enzo grinned. Progress. As he worked, Yil stepped closer, tapping at the scanner in its hand. I have analyzed the contents of all human consumables aboard. The majority remain within acceptable parameters. Glad to hear it. There is one more can of chili. Enzo froze. Don't even think about it, he said. I will vaporize it. Please do. They stood there, man and alien, in the heart of a ship hurtling through space, bonded by one very bad decision and a slowly healing wrist. Enzo looked at Yil. You ever eat anything just because you were curious? I do not eat. Right? Well, if you ever do, don't start with chili. Yil nodded once. Acknowledged. And for the first time, Enzo swore he saw something close to amusement in those unblinking eyes. Enzo was not supposed to be moving heavy containers, which was exactly why he was doing it. The central cargo hold sector G had developed a minor atmospheric imbalance, something about ion redistribution after the last pass through the asteroid belt. The engineers had flagged it, filed the report, and promptly left it for someone else to deal with. Which meant it sat for nearly a week, slowly accumulating condensation and a faint chemical tang that made the air taste like old batteries. Enzo had volunteered to help relocate the supplies. Light stuff only, Dr. Velasquez had said, pointing a scanner at his wrist. No lifting anything over 5 kilos. You're still healing. He'd nodded, agreed, and then immediately found the heaviest crate he could justify touching. It was awkward, not impossibly heavy, but wide enough that he had to pivot sideways at each corner. He just managed to wedge it through the secondary hatch when a soft chime echoed from the corridor. The hatch irised open, and 2 of the krill stepped in. They moved like upright mantises, all jointed limbs and smooth chitin that shifted from pale gray to deep green as they approached. One carried a vapor disperser. The other, Enzo recognized, was the same one who'd once tried to sterilize the med bay using a compound that melted plastic. Human Enzo, said the disperser-wielding krill. You are not permitted to exert pressure on your healing appendage. I'm not exerting, Enzo said, setting the crate down with a grunt. This is more of a controlled slide. The krill tilted its head. That distinction lacks empirical value. Yeah, but it sounds better. The second krill crouched beside the crate, running a sensor over the base. This container contains carbon-based ration packs. Shelf life exceeds your digestive limits. Enzo narrowed his eyes. Are you cataloging my food again? Your nutrition patterns have been flagged as high variance. You're still on that? The taller krill adjusted the disperser nozzle. Your prior consumption event indicated significant deviation from recommended protocols. Surveillance has been authorized. Wait, Enzo said, holding up both hands. Am I being monitored every time I eat now? No. Only when you are unsupervised near unsanctioned materials. I was just moving a crate. The shorter krill pointed at the side of the box. This symbol indicates ration overflow. These are not included in the current cycle manifest. I wasn't going to eat them. I was relocating them. The krill exchanged glances, or what passed for glances, given their eye placements. I'll sign a waiver, Enzo offered. No chili this time. A pause. Then you are under observation. Enzo sighed. Of course I am. Later that cycle, after the crates were repositioned and the atmospheric filters recalibrated, Enzo returned to his bunk, only to find Yiln sitting cross-legged on the floor. You left your quarters without alerting medical. I left a note. Yiln stared at him. Fine, Enzo said. I left a note on my pad. Maybe I didn't hit send. There is concern. I didn't eat anything, Enzo said, dropping onto the edge of the bed. Not even by accident. That is not the primary concern. Enzo rubbed his temples. So what is? Yiln stood, unfolding slowly. Your physiology is not fully restored. You are exposing your structure to strain. Yeah, I noticed. My wrist sounds like a plastic hinge every time I turn it wrong. There are alternatives to physical labor. There are also alternatives to sitting around for 6 hours doing nothing. I picked the one that makes me feel useful. Yiln paced to the edge of the room, then turned. I do not understand your insistence on self-risk. I'm not risking anything. Not really. You are disregarding directive limitations. Because I know my limits better than a chart does. That assertion lacks validation. Enzo rolled his eyes. You guys love validation. Yiln stepped closer, lowering its voice slightly. You ingest unstable materials. You commit to tasks that result in injury. You joke about both. This behavior is inconsistent with species preservation. Enzo leaned back against the wall. You know what's inconsistent with species preservation? Sitting around waiting for conditions to be perfect. If humans did that, we'd still be arguing about whether it's safe to leave caves. Yiln said nothing. You want to understand us? Enzo asked. We don't just adapt to risk. We use it. We push into it, figure out how far we can bend before we break. Then we figure out how to break better next time. Yiln studied him. That is not a sustainable model. No. But it's how we ended up here. The next 24 hours passed without incident, which would have been a relief if it hadn't felt so much like a setup. Enzo was on the observation deck, watching a slow swirl of plasma drift through the outer field when the ship trembled. Not violently, just a brief shudder, as though something large had bumped into them gently. He tapped the console. Proximity alert, came a voice over the comms. Unidentified object at bearing 6.2. Minimal motion. No signal. Enzo straightened. I'm on G deck. Want me to take a look? A beat of silence. Negative. Remain on standby. He stood anyway. By the time he reached the auxiliary bay, 2 Furlathi were already scanning the viewport. They looked like upright serpents wearing armor made of flexible glass. One of them turned as he entered. Human Enzo. You were not summoned. Yeah, I figured that might have just been a formality. The Furlathi didn't respond. Through the viewport, the object hovered like a misshapen egg, matte black with edges that shimmered faintly in the artificial gravity well. It had no visible propulsion, no markings, and didn't rotate. What is it? Enzo asked. Unknown. Non-responsive to hailing. No heat signature. No emissions. So just floating? For now. The other Furlathi adjusted the focus. It bears superficial resemblance to human escape pods, but lacks identifiable access seams. Enzo stepped closer. Could be a decoy, a probe, or something that used to be a pod and isn't anymore. It exhibits minor gravitational distortion. Should we pull it in? The Furlathi hesitated. Then retrieval has been authorized. Minimal contact protocol. No organic exposure. Right, Enzo said, so I'll just stand over here and not touch anything. The retrieval drone latched onto the object and guided it into quarantine chamber 2. As the doors sealed, the lights dimmed slightly. The interior cameras showed the object resting in the isolation cradle, utterly inert. For the next 3 hours, nothing happened. Then it cracked. Not exploded. Not opened. Cracked like ice under tension. A jagged line split down one side, faintly glowing at the edges. The ship's alert system pinged. Enzo, still outside the chamber with the Furlothi, squinted at the screen. That doesn't look like a pod anymore. No known materials match the emission spectrum, the taller Furlothi said. Think it's dangerous? Unknown. Enzo folded his arms. We should probably assume yes. By the time Yil arrived, the crack had widened. A strange mist was leaking from the object, pooling at the floor of the chamber. Environmental shift detected, one of the Furlothi said. Atmospheric composition altering. Vent it, Yil ordered. The mist didn't dissipate. Is it heavier than air? Enzo asked. Not measurable. Yil stared at the screen, then turned to Enzo. You are not authorized in this sector. I was already here. That is not a justification. Neither is ignoring it when things get weird. Yil stepped away from the console. This object may pose biological risk. You are vulnerable. You've got a sterilization protocol. Use it. There is no guarantee of efficacy. Enzo looked at the screen again. The mist was forming patterns now, swirling into geometric shapes that pulsed with faint light. Okay, he said. That's new. Yil watched in silence. I know I'm not supposed to be in here, Enzo continued, but if that thing's doing something cognitive, we might need a human perspective. Why? Because if it's using symbolic logic, humans are good at interpreting patterns. Even the weird ones. Yil didn't move. Look, Enzo said, I won't touch anything. I'll just observe. If it starts hatching or melting stuff, I'll back off. The chamber lights flickered. Then the object pulsed once bright enough to white out the camera feed. When the image returned, the mist was gone. So was the object. Enzo blinked. Did it just leave? No sensors detected movement. Then where is it? Yil didn't answer. The Furlothi checked the chamber. It was empty. No residue. No radiation. No heat. Enzo leaned toward the screen. That's not how physics works. Yil turned to him. You are to report to medical. I didn't even, now. As he followed Yil out, the door behind them sealed with a hiss. Enzo sat on the exam bed, shirt off, a biosensor patch stuck to his chest. The med scanner hummed softly above him, brushing a cone of dull blue light over his torso. Dr. Velasquez tapped through the readouts, jaw tight. I'm fine, Enzo said again. You experienced a full sensory flash, localized neural spike, and a cardiac rhythm jump. You are not fine, she said without glancing up. Your system flooded with norepinephrine like you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Well, to be fair, there was a glowing crack in a mystery object and then it vanished into thin air. She narrowed her eyes at the monitor. If you were exposed to anything, I need to know. You didn't breathe anything in? No mist, Enzo said. Yil had us behind the barrier the whole time. I didn't touch a thing. Doesn't rule out radiation. Or a directed pulse. Or something we don't have a name for. There's nothing wrong with me. Except your heart tried to pogo stick out of your ribcage. Enzo leaned back against the wall. I'm telling you, it was just weird. Like a jump scare, but with science. She removed the scanner and started peeling off the biosensor. You're getting a full neuroimaging series after this. And I'm logging an incident report. Come on, we don't even know if it did anything. That's exactly why I'm logging it. Yil stepped into the med bay, its gait slower than usual. Enzo noticed its upper limb joints flex tighter, like it was bracing. You observed the object's disappearance, Yil said. More like blinked and it was gone. There is no record of molecular dispersal. No energy trace. No matter residue. Dr. Velasquez pulled up a secondary panel. Then either it wasn't matter as we understand it, or it phased out. Enzo raised an eyebrow. Like it went intangible? Or it was never fully tangible in the first place. Yil's gaze drifted between them. The Frolothi have requested a full sweep of containment fields. They are concerned it may have integrated. Integrated? Enzo asked. With what? Unknown. Dr. Velasquez crossed her arms. If it's inside the ship now, we'd be seeing environmental disruptions. Not necessarily, Yil said. It may be passive. Or dormant, Enzo added. Or unbound by linear presence. Dr. Velasquez frowned. That's not a real thing. It is now, Enzo said. Yil gestured toward the corridor. You are cleared for return. However, restrictions apply. I didn't even get near the thing. You are the only one whose biofeedback spiked during the event. Enzo swung his legs off the bed. So what? I'm the common denominator again? You were also the only organic present. Dr. Velasquez handed him a small data chip. Wear the portable monitor for 72 hours. Any anomalies, report immediately. What do I do in the meantime? Yil answered before she could. You will participate in the containment review. Enzo blinked. I'm not an engineer. You are a variable, Yil said. Variables must be understood. 5 hours later, Enzo stood in Quarantine Module 3 with 6 beings who had no patience for ambiguity. They formed a semicircle around a projected schematic of the vanished object. The Frolothi had reconstructed its external shell from archived sensor data, but the interior remained a blank zone. The Lanique delegate, shaped like a cross between a jellyfish and a chandelier, pulsed a soft amber. No thermal activity. No acoustic resonance. It did not respond to directed pulses. A Croth technician encased in a sealed exosuit due to their methane-dependent biology clicked its mandibles. It ignored gravitational tug. Not massless, but not cooperative. Enzo folded his arms. What if it wasn't ignoring us? What if it didn't recognize us? The Lanique shimmered. Clarify. Well, everything we did assumed it was a thing we could prod into reacting. What if it wasn't a thing in the way we understand it? What if it was more like a presence? You were suggesting sentience? The Croth asked. Not necessarily. Just something that interacts differently. Like trying to shake hands with fog. The Frolothi technician adjusted the projection. We detected no biological elements. Enzo pointed at the mist. You ever seen vapor take on geometric shapes without a pattern source? No, then maybe it wasn't vapor. The Croth made a low clicking sound. You propose a cognitive manifestation. I'm saying we might have been looking at it backward. We assumed it was a vessel or container. What if it was never carrying anything? What if it was the event? Yil, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. There is a possibility it existed only to be observed. Enzo nodded slowly. And now it's done. The Lanique shifted colors again. Then what purpose did it serve? Enzo shrugged. Maybe none. Maybe it was like one of those deep-sea creatures that only shows up once every few decades, flashes its lights, and disappears. The Croth snapped its mandibles twice. That is not a satisfying conclusion. Neither is a migraine, Enzo said, rubbing his forehead. Which I now have. Yil stepped forward. Human Enzo, return to Med Bay for neural imaging. Enzo groaned. I just got out. The Lanique require a brain map comparison. Lucky me. 2 hours later, he lay inside the scanner chamber, head cradled in the sensor ring, while a low hum pulsed around him. Dr. Velasquez stood outside the glass, arms folded as she watched the monitor. You're showing elevated activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, consistent with stress. I've been in meetings with aliens who don't believe in chairs. Of course I'm stressed. Everything else is normal. No lesions. No disruptions. So I'm neurotypical and annoyed. You're healthy. Annoyance is your baseline. She powered down the scanner and helped him sit up. You're cleared, but you're staying on active watch. Just in case. Enzo rubbed the back of his neck. So we're just going to pretend a mystery object didn't vanish from reality? We documented it. No one's going to believe that. Good thing we don't run on belief. Yil waited just outside the med bay as Enzo exited. You have been declared non-reactive. Great. So I'm officially uninteresting. There's value in stability. Tell that to my social life. Yil paused. We have reviewed your behavior logs over the last 72 hours. You followed all containment protocols. Enzo looked at it. You sound surprised. I am acknowledging behavioral consistency. I'm growing. Or reverting to baseline. He shook his head. I miss the days when the biggest issue was expired chili. Yil's eyes blinked in slow sequence. That incident was statistically more hazardous. And yet somehow less weird. They walked in silence for a moment through the corridor, the ship humming beneath their feet. Do you think it'll come back? Enzo asked. Yil considered. I do not believe it left. He stopped. What does that mean? It was observed. It ceased to be. Perhaps that is its life cycle. Observation is function? Possibly. Enzo exhaled. Well, I hope it enjoyed the show. Yil looked at him. You are no longer flagged for surveillance. Big relief. You may resume standard tasks. So, back to inventory? Yes. Can I at least request a different sector? No, he sighed. Figures. They reached the central lift, and as the doors opened, a faint static buzz passed over Enzo's skin. He paused. You feel that? Yil adjusted its internal sensors, then shook its head. There is no anomaly. Enzo stared at the lift ceiling, then stepped inside. Must be my imagination. Yil followed. Or perhaps a reminder. The doors closed behind them, and the ship continued through the void, unbothered. Nothing shimmered, nothing cracked, and for once that was enough.